What is investment banking and how does one build a career in it? What are the core skills needed in this field? We're going to try and cover all of this in this particular video. My name is Piyush and I run FinShiksha. I have close to about 20 years of experience in financial services, and that has spanned across equity research, fund management, and training. I've trained people across multiple organizations in the capital markets domain. And through these interactions of these firms, we have an understanding of what skills are needed in these areas, because that's what we train these employees in these organizations on, right? So stay with me till the end and we'll cover everything about investment banking and what are the skills needed in this space. Before we go there, just a quick announcement that we are doing a series of these videos in terms of careers in equity research, careers in investment banking, wealth management, private equity, venture capital. Subscribe to our channel so that you're updated about all these videos. We've already done one on careers in equity research. The link to that would be available in the description. Let's jump right back to investment banking. So what exactly is investment banking? Now, in simple words, if you're helping a corporate raise or deploy capital, पैसा raise करने में या पैसा use या deploy करने में, if you're helping a corporate, that is what investment banking is, right? There are layers around this. There are various kinds of activities. You would have heard of terms like mergers and acquisitions, IPOs, private equity funding, venture capital funding, debt syndication, structured products. A lot of these terms are aligned within the context of investment banking. But in a small, simple language, if we are to try and define investment banking, that's how do you help a corporate raise or deploy capital, right? Now, within that purview, you could divide the activities in terms of transactions and in terms of markets. What do you mean by transactions? So if you're acquiring another firm, or if you're selling a stake in your firm, or if you're raising some capital in the form of equity or debt, or if you're doing an IPO, all of that would fit under the transaction segment, right? Markets, on the other hand, would involve things like trading, right? Where you're trading on various asset classes like equity, debt, commodities, currencies, derivatives on all of these. So trading on all of these areas like structured products, etc., all of that would come under the markets bracket, right? Now, there's a small sort of nuance around how do you look at investment banking. Globally, investment banks are the umbrella firm, right? So Goldman Sachs is a global, full service investment bank, and HSBC is a full service investment bank. And within that, you would house their sort of commercial banking and, their asset management and their portfolio management and wealth management and all other businesses. In India, typically the way we talk about it is the bank is the primary entity. Like you would have an ICICI Bank or a Kotak Mahindra Bank, and under those entities, you would have specific investment banking arms, right? So that's a slight nuance in terms of global banks and Indian banks. A lot of investment banking firms in India are boutique investment banks who basically only do transactions, right? It's not necessary that every firm would end up doing all of these activities. So once again, in short, an investment bank is a bank that's like a consultant to corporates, helping a corporate raise or deploy capital. Not all investment banks would be doing all activities that are listed on the left side. Yeah. So, a boutique investment bank may be doing part of these activities only. A full service investment bank would basically be doing everything, right? Now, let's dig deeper in terms of some of these activities. So when you talk about transactions, you could have stuff like M&A, mergers and acquisitions, one firm acquiring stake in another firm, one firm completely acquiring another firm, two firms merging with each other, right? So all of these activities are going to form the segment of mergers and acquisitions, and that comes under the transaction side of things. You could have IPO advisory, a new firm coming up with an IPO. Let's say Zepto tomorrow decides to file for an IPO, and that IPO advisory will be done by an investment bank. This investment bank will help them prepare that DRHP, the red herring prospectus that is there. They'll also do road shows. They'll connect them to investors, and the entire paraphernalia around the IPO is taken care by the investment bank who's advising on that IPO. You could deal with fundraising, which is just simple. Zepto says, I want funds from private equity investors, right? So an investment bank could be facilitating that activity. There's a small hospital chain that wants to raise money, for example. So essentially, that's where fundraising is going to come. Fundraising can again kind of happen in two kinds of markets. So obviously, IPO advisory is also kind of fundraising, but I've listed that separately because that's like a common separate sort of arm altogether. But within fundraising, you have two further segments like equity capital markets and debt capital markets. Equity capital markets would deal with your IPO segment essentially, where you're going to stock markets and basically raising money. Debt capital markets is where you're basically raising money in the form of bonds, bond issuances, right? You could also sort of go for a very large debt. Let's say a company like Reliance wants a 20,000 crore debt, right? So now one bank is not going to give that. So an investment bank could help multiple banks get into this. And this is what is called as debt syndication. Usually these would be the investment banking arm of one of these large banks itself. But that's another area where, let's say, investment banks kind of help. In a nutshell, raising or deploying capital, either from equity markets or from debt markets, deploying in the sense of going and buying stake in another company for M&A purposes, right? On the market side, as I said, you could be trading in various asset classes. You could be doing structuring or structured products, which are given to various clients globally. And obviously sales of all these products essentially has to be done. Pre-global financial crisis, proprietary trading, which is trading on the own capital of a bank, used to be very big. That's gone down significantly post 2008. But still, global banks do a lot of these activities in markets. Indian investment banks do not have too many specific roles around the markets side, right? Most of it is transactions oriented that we look at. There's another set of classifications that comes up when you're looking at this in terms of the investment banking structure, which is, you would have heard of terms like front office, middle office, and back office, right? Front office is the client facing role. So when an investment bank is basically helping do IPO advisory or going and helping in an M&A transaction, or there's research that is happening around some of this, all of that is front office activity, right? All your risk management sits in the middle office. So typically your risk management is going to kind of sit here in the middle office. A part of global research also kind of come under middle office. The lines are a little bit blurred in that context. Back office would typically be operations and compliance, right? So typically that's how the structuring kind of works. In India, you have a lot of these bigger investment banks, global investment banks who have investment banking arms in India. You have Indian banks, all your ICICIs and Kotaks and HDFCs of the world who would have investment banking arms. All your, there are a lot of boutique firms like likes of Avendus or O3 Capital or Allegro Capital or Spark Capital, bunch of others who would also be kind of supporting these activities. Avendus, of course, has become very large now. There could also be sectoral niche that could get created, that some of these could be very strong in the technology sector. Some of these could be very strong in the healthcare sector and so on and so forth, right? So that's the sort of segmentation that exists. Now, let's think about what would be the skill set that would be needed in this space, right? Assume there's a Zepto who comes and says that I have to raise money, right? Now, note that the investment banker has to be aware of what this segment is. What are the sort of nuances about quick commerce? How's the growth going to be? So you have to be very, very good with industry understanding, right? Almost as good as what the company management knows about it. That's how you're going to pitch, right? It's not like Zepto will come directly to an investment bank. Most likely, the investment bank will go to Zepto and say, we can help you raise money. The first question the customer is going to ask is why? How will you help us, right? So from an investment banker's perspective, understanding of sectoral dynamics is absolutely critical. Of course, the skill set is similar in a sense to equity research as well, where you have to have a sense of the company analysis as well. You need to know how company financials work. You need to know how industries work. And eventually you are buying or selling stake in a company. So you need to know how valuation works as well. A lot of this typically is early stage. So of course, early stage valuation becomes important. A lot of it could be sort of late stage in terms of mergers and acquisitions or, growth capital that comes in private equity firms essentially. So there are mature firms that you're kind of looking where standard valuation techniques are needed. But a lot of emphasis is on understanding the industry, the key drivers, understanding the company. Are you able to actually identify who's going to be a target company, for example? Let's say there's a big, large hospital that comes and says, I want to acquire a small hospital chain, right? Or a small hospital that is available. So the first thing you need to know is look at financials of various hospitals and understand who could be a likely target, right? And then basically say, where is there a synergy that comes in when one hospital acquires the another hospital? Is there geographical synergy? Is there synergy across therapies that they're kind of working on? So then you go and pitch accordingly. And then there's this entire valuation exercise that what is a correct value to pay. So you need to understand the sector. You need to understand what is a good target candidate when you are helping a company acquire another company. And you need to, of course, understand valuation. Needless to say, financial modeling in Excel is a core skill. Initially in your career in investment banking, bulk of the time, you're going to do a lot of work around Excel, right? Building financial models. And a lot of the times this is early stage working. So what typically happens is in early stage companies give you data in the form of just MISs, right? There could be a retail firm that will give you data of 200 stores, right? And you have to collate all of that, do analysis on it, and then build a model around it saying, okay, this is what makes sense. There could be a quick commerce firm that could give you data on a dark store level, right? एक store का एक locality का data आपको Excel में मिल सकता है. So ability to handle large amounts of data in Excel and make sense of it is a very, very critical skill, right? Initially in your career, you'll be working a lot on Excel, a lot on financial, sort of presentations as well, because investment bankers keep pitching about companies, keep pitching about their business to a lot of companies. So ability to make good presentations is also very, very important. If you are in the markets role, then understanding of global markets is very necessary. How do currencies work? How do commodities work? How do derivatives work? What kind of, sort of instruments are available globally when you're trading in markets and so on and so forth. So that is absolutely necessary. And almost all of the fields that are front-end client-facing fields, like investment banking, would require a lot of business development and negotiation skills. Business development, because most of the times you will have to go to a client and say, why don't you raise capital? I can help you raise capital, right? Otherwise, business doesn't just fall in the lap of an investment bank. You have to go and get it, right? There are multiple investment banks who are fighting for it. And eventually, there's going to be a negotiation requirement as well, because you're dealing with valuation. So you're selling stake or buying stake in an entity, right? So there is going to be a negotiation that is going to happen around those parameters. So that becomes a core skill as well in the investment banking segment. Once again, just similar to equity research, these skills are non-negotiable. There aren't too many job roles that are available. Investment banks typically hire from top tier campuses, or they have their own sort of hiring programs where they hire undergrads as well and put them through a lot of training programs essentially. But the core skill set that is needed to get in is really critical and non-negotiable, because there are thousands and thousands of students who are fighting for these roles, right? What is good and what is not so good within the role? So no discussion about a role is complete without having clearly discussed what is good and what is not so good. So what is good about investment banking is a very dynamic field once again, right? Every day there's a new company that is trying to raise money and you're helping them out. You're trying to find opportunities where you can help out companies raise capital or deploy capital. You're reading about new sectors, new developments, what's going to work, what's going to not work, how our business is going to develop. So lots of dynamic sort of learning opportunity that comes up in an investment bank. What is not so good in some cases is this is a very high intensity role. So at various points of time, there's a deal going on, for example, or there's a company that is filing for an IPO and there's a deadline around that. There's a lot of work that goes behind these deals and IPOs essentially. So there are periods where you'll be working for like 15 hours a day for, a couple of months at a stretch. So there is a very high intensity requirement in this kind of a role. If you're someone who doesn't want to do that, then this is not the field for you. If you're someone who thrives or enjoys in this kind of high intensity work culture, then investment banking is the field for you. Do not go and choose investment banking because somebody said it's a great field, it pays a lot. Of course, it pays a lot, but it demands a lot of work ethic around that as well. It demands that there are periods of high intensity work and you should be able to cope up with it. Behaviorally, it's challenging because not everybody is cut out to do that kind of work. So decide carefully if you're going to build a career in investment banking or not, right? That in a nutshell is what investment banking is about. I would reiterate once again that all the skill sets that are mentioned here are kind of non-negotiable because there are a lot of people who are fighting for these roles. These are some of the top end roles in financial services and a lot of students are essentially aspiring for this. So ensure that you do not leave any stone unturned in acquiring these skills if you're targeting for investment banking. That's broadly about investment banking. If you have any suggestions in terms of what more videos we should cover, please put that in the comments box. If you have any questions about investment banking, please put that in the comments box as well. If you think the video was useful, please like it. That's it in this particular video. Thank you.